Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for May the 3rd. Today we are reading together in Numbers chapter 31, which is the continuation of what we saw back in chapter 25, where the women of Moab and the Midianites, and they're all involved in that chapter, lead the men of Israel into sinning against Yahweh. There is sexual adultery and fornication. There is spiritual adultery and fornication taking place. And at the end of that chapter, you might remember in chapter 25, where Yahweh told Moses, this is Numbers 25 and verse number 16, and verse 17, attack the Midianites and strike them dead, for they attacked you with the treachery that they used against you in the Peor incident. They did the same in the case involving their sister Cosbi, daughter of the Midianite leader, who was killed the day the plague came at Peor. So here in chapter 31, we are going to see those instructions carried out in this war against Israel. So let's read that together here in Numbers chapter 31. Numbers 31, verse number 1, Yahweh spoke to Moses, execute vengeance for the Israelites against the Midianites. After that, you will be gathered to your people. So Moses spoke to the people, equip some of your men for war. They will go against Midian to inflict Yahweh's vengeance on them. Send 1,000 men to war from each Israelite tribe. So 1,000 were recruited from each Israelite tribe out of the thousands in Israel. 12,000 equipped for war. Moses sent 1,000 from each tribe to war. They went with Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, in whose care were the holy objects and signal trumpets. They waged war against Midian, as Yahweh had commanded Moses, and killed every male. Along with the others slain by them, they killed the Midianite kings, Evi, Rakim, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. The Israelites took the Midianite women and their dependents captive, and they plundered all their cattle, flocks, and property. Then they burned all the cities where the Midianites lived, as well as all their encampments. They took away all the spoils of war and the captives, both people and animals. They brought the prisoners, animals, and spoils of war to Moses, the priest Eleazar, and the Israelite community at the camp on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. Moses and the priest Eleazar and all the leaders of the community went to meet them outside the camp. But Moses became furious with the officers and commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds who were returning from the military campaign. He asked them in verse 15, have you let every female live? Yet they are the ones who, at Balaam's advice, incited the Israelites to unfaithfulness against Yahweh in the Peor incident, so that the plague came against Yahweh's community. So now kill every male among the dependents and kill every woman who has gone to bed with a man. But keep alive for yourselves all the young females who have not gone to bed with a man. You are to remain outside the camp for 7 days. All of you and your prisoners who have killed a person or touched the dead are to purify yourselves on the 3rd day and the 7th day. Also purify everything, garments, leather goods, things made of goat hair, and every article of wood. Then the priest Eleazar said to the soldiers who had gone to battle, this is the legal statute. Yahweh commanded Moses, the gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, and lead, everything that can withstand fire, you are to pass through fire, and it will be clean. It must still be purified with the purification water. Anything that cannot withstand fire, pass through the water. Excuse me. On the 7th day, wash your clothes, and you will be clean. After that, you may enter the camp. Verse 25, Yahweh told Moses, you, the priest Eleazar, and the family heads of the community are to take account of what was captured, people and animals. Then divide the captives between the troops who went out to war and the entire community. Set aside a tribute for Yahweh from what belongs to the fighting men who go out to war, 1 out of every 500 people, cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. Take the tribute from their half and give it to the priest Eleazar as a contribution to Yahweh. From the Israelites' half, Take one out of every 50 from the people, cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats, all the livestock, and give them to the Levites who perform the duties of Yahweh's tabernacle. So Moses and the priest Eleazar did as Yahweh commanded Moses. The captives remaining from the plunder the army had taken totaled 675,000 sheep and goats, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 people, all the females who had not gone to bed with a man. The half of those who went out to war numbered 337,500 sheep and goats, and the tribute to Yahweh was 675 from the sheep and the goats. From the 36,000 cattle, the tribute to Yahweh was 72. From the 30,500 donkeys, the tribute to Yahweh was 61. From the 16,000 people, the tribute to Yahweh was 32. Moses gave the tribute to the priest Eleazar as a contribution for Yahweh, as Yahweh had commanded Moses. From the Israelites, half which Moses separated from the men who fought, the community's half was 337,500 sheep and goats, 36,000 cattle, 3,500 donkeys, and 16,000 people. Moses took one out of every 50 selected from the people and the livestock of the Israelites' half. He gave them to the Levites who performed the duties of Yahweh's tabernacle as Yahweh had commanded him. The officers who were over the thousands of the army, the commanders of thousands and hundreds, approached Moses and told him, "Your servants have taken a census of the fighting men under our command, and not one of us is missing. So we have presented to Yahweh an offering of the gold articles each man found, armlets, bracelets, rings, earrings, and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before Yahweh." Moses and the priest Eleazar received from them all the articles made of gold, all the gold of the contribution they offered to Yahweh. For the commanders of thousands and hundreds was 420 pounds. Each of the soldiers had taken plunder for himself. Moses and the priest Eleazar received the gold from the commanders of the thousands and of hundreds and brought it to the tent of meeting as a memorial for the Israelites before Yahweh. And that is Numbers chapter 31. Now, again, we have to remember to connect this with what we see in chapter 35, and that's made very clear in the middle of the chapter, or around the middle of the chapter, once the people come back and the leadership realizes that they have allowed the women who were seemingly involved in that incident to live. So we have to make that connection, and we'll tie that in as well. So just think about this for a second. That is time as they are moving through the land. Remember, the Midianites were kind of a nomadic people, and you find them sometimes grouped up and teamed up with various other Canaanite peoples. So sometimes you see them with the Moabites, as we see in this instance. If I remember correctly, I think it is in Genesis 38. Excuse me. Voice trying to go out on me. Genesis 37, Genesis 37, where they are, let's see here, where the Midianites are connected. There were some Ishmaelites. So you'll find them connected with random people throughout the text of the Old Testament. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that, again, they do not have a singular king because they are nomadic people. They are broken up into various tribes and families and such, which is why it talks about the 5 Midianite kings being killed. One of those, Zur, being the father of the woman killed in chapter 25. So there's a connection there as well. Just to notice within this chapter, there are a number of things that have been previously instructed that we see properly carried out throughout this chapter. Verse number 6 talks about Eleazar, or excuse me, it talks about Phinehas going out. Remember, Phinehas has already been active in this battle, basically. He's the one who ran through the rebellious Israelite man and the woman, the daughter of Zur, in chapter 25. So he goes ahead and goes out to war. Eleazar, serving as high priest now, probably good for him to stay back. So Phinehas goes out and says that Phinehas takes the signal trumpets, which is something that's instructed in chapter 10. They sound the trumpets whenever it's time to go out to war. Also in verses 19 and 20, we see them, you might have noticed as I read that the let's see here. Verse 13, that Moses and the priest Eleazar and all the leaders of the community went to meet them. This is the returning battle party, went to meet them outside the camp. Outside the camp. They didn't allow them to come into the camp. They went and met them outside the camp. Why? Because they're unclean. They've been at war. They've been surrounded by death. So here we have purification rituals, which line up with what we see concerning the red heifer, the red cow, in chapter 19. Now, it might be kind of strange, why is it these people will be unclean even though they're going out to participate in something that Yahweh wants them to do? A good quote that a friend shared on Facebook, and that I happen to have the same resource as well from Wyndham that I've shared with you yesterday and a couple other previous times. Again, I'll show you this resource again. It's a good little piece of material here. But reading from his commentary on page 236, this talks about the atonement that is needed for the soldiers coming back from war, and for all those who were involved, including the captives that were brought back. We'll discuss them here again in a minute. But it says, all loss of human life, whether natural, willful murder, accidental manslaughter, or executions carried out in response to divine command, may defile and require cleansing. Over every war, however glorious its outcome from the victor's point of view, hangs the shadow of death. These purification rules remind Israel that the death of one's fellow man was a catastrophic disruption of God's creation, even though in some cases it was the Creator himself who demanded the execution of the sinner. So even though this was God's command for them to go engage in this warfare, there was still death, and death cannot enter God's camp, for he is the God of life. So they had to go through the ritual purification ceremony that was detailed again back in chapter 19 of Numbers. But going back again, talking about the anger of Moses, he was furious with the officers because they allowed the women, the very women who Balaam incited to produce the unfaithfulness of Israel. You've brought them here. They need to die. You need to kill the males because they might grow up and seek vengeance against us. You need to kill any of the females who are no longer virgins, who have gone to bed with man, because that could include them here. But then the younger ones that are still virgins, you can keep for yourselves. And that might seem strange to us. Well, why would you bring these Midianite women into the number of Israel? Well, because, I mean, what would you rather them be? Would you rather them be among the Midianites in paganism, or be a part of God's people, to be the word just left my head, to be this isn't the word, but naturalized into the Jewish community, integrated there? That might be the word I'm thinking of. Would you rather them remain as pagans, or would you rather them be integrated into the Jewish community where they become Yahweh worshipers? Certainly that would be the case, and that's not something that is abnormal. I mean, we think about Ruth, the Moabitess, who ends up coming into the nation of Israel and is in the lineage of Jesus. So that's not an uncommon thing for us to see here. Also, you have later on talks about these people who are going to be servants among Israel. Don't exactly know what their role of servants is, but again, they would be integrated into the nation of Israel. That's a good thing. It's a good thing for these individuals who are part of the nations to now be brought into Israel and allow Israel to be that kingdom of priests, which will mediate between the nations and God and bring the nations closer to God. That's what we want. And that's one of the benefits of this war, is that there is this ability for those who become captives of war to be integrated into Israel. But some people, of course, have issue with the mass slaughter that takes place, all the death that takes place within war. How could a good God allow and even command for war to take place like this? And the reality is that these are pagans. They are ones who have forsaken the natural pursuit of Yahweh, the Creator, and have pursued pagan gods, pagan deities who have given themselves over to them and become involved in all sorts of evil wickedness. So the death that they experience in this battle is just from the standpoint of God, that they have rebelled against him, and we know that sin requires death. Again, that might not settle it for some, that might not be satisfying for some, but that's just the reality of it. The wages of sin is death. We talk about the idea of atonement, that atonement takes place when blood is shed, and for these individuals, their sin would require their own blood being shed. So that's just a reality of the situation as well. Some other things where we see previous instructions being carried out is in verses 25 through 47, where the spoils of war are divided up between the soldiers and the rest of Israel. We see that some of the spoils would be given to the Levites to support them. That goes back to chapter 18. We also see that some of these things, 1 out of every 500 of the spoils given to the soldiers would be given to the tabernacle system. For the rest of the people, 1 out of every 50 would be given for the Levites. So again, in the tabernacle system and in the Levites, from their point of view, they are supported by the people. They serve a big role for the people in the fact that they are the mediating points between Yahweh and themselves. Therefore, it is only right for them to be supported by the people. Again, the worker is worthy of his wages, and that's what they're doing. They're working for the people. Therefore, the people support them in their work. Last thing I'll note is in verse number 49, that the officers who were over the thousands of the army and the commanders of thousands and hundreds approached Moses and told him, your servants have taken a census of the fighting men under your command, and not one of them is missing. That means they went to war and not one of them died. How incredible to think about that. How incredible to think that of all those that they killed, not one Israelite was killed. Not one was lost in battle. So we have presented to Yahweh an offering of the gold articles each man found, armlets, bracelets, rings, earrings, and necklaces to make atonement for ourselves before Yahweh. The contribution that was required was shattered. One note I have here says that they gave 3 times more than what was required from Yahweh. And they gave sacrificially because of their thanksgiving to God for bringing every single one of their soldiers home. What an incredible thing that we see here in Numbers 31. Yes, Moses is mad, but they make things right. They purge the sin from the camp. They take care of the uncleanness that is in the camp. They go through the proper protocol. The priests have their trumpets as they're supposed to have them. The spoils that are brought are divvied up and contributed to the work of the Levites and the work of the tabernacles. I'm telling you what, man, chapter 31 is a good win. Chapter 31 is a good page in the history of the children of Israel. And again, we've transitioned there back in chapter 26, I believe it is. Let me double check that. I'm pretty sure that is correct. Chapter 26 is our transition point. Yeah, chapter 26 is our transition point, that this is now that latter generation. This is the younger generation that has stepped up to be the main characters in this Exodus story, making their way to the promised land, and they're making right on some of the failures of the previous generation. The instructions that have been given previously, they've carried them out. 31 is a good chapter, and we would hope that this would be the normal way things will play out. And really through Joshua, there's a lot of success. But unfortunately, we get to Judges after that. And, again, if you see a little bit of smoke coming from the pages, a little ways down your Bible, that's probably just Judges. It's a smoldering, garbage dump fire. And that just is what it is. We're going to learn a lot from that, though. I'm actually really excited to read through Judges with you here in the next few months. But before then, we have a little bit more to read here in Numbers. Then we'll go through Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is a great text. Really excited for that as well. I'm really excited for all these, honestly, just because there's a lot of good stuff here within the Old Testament, which is why we're giving attention to that this year, reading through these historic portions of the Old Testament, because there's a lot for us to learn, a whole lot for us to learn. And I hope that you've been benefited in these readings that we've had together. Hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday, everyone. We'll be back at it again tomorrow, reading together in chapter 32. And before that, actually, we'll be gathering tonight for our Bible studies at 7 p.m. I hope to see you all there. Again, have a great rest of your Wednesday. We'll be back at it again tomorrow, reading Numbers 32 together. Take care and God bless.